Welcome to today's episode of the Working Wisdom podcast series, brought to you by the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston. We're having a conversation about work-life balance, how to navigate and overcome challenges within your career, and how to make business more accommodating to a diverse workforce.
Welcome to the Working Wisdom podcast from the C.T. Bauer College of Business. I am Dr. Vanessa Patrick. I am the Associate Dean for Research and Bauer Professor of Marketing. Today, it was my great pleasure to talk to a friend and a colleague, Funda Sahin. Funda is a professor in the supply chain department at the Bauer College, and I just wanted to give her the warmest welcome. Welcome, Funda.
Thank you, Vanessa. Very nice to see you.
It's lovely to see you too. I'm excited to chat with you today on the podcast. I wanted to get started by just asking you a little bit about yourself, and if you could familiarize our listeners to who you are.
Sure. Again, I'm Funda Sahin. I'm in the Decision and Information Sciences Department in the Supply Chain Management area. And I'm originally from Turkey. I was born and grew up in Istanbul. And I got my MBA in Accounting and Finance from Texas A&M University. And I thought I was going to end up being a consultant, just pursuing a career in finance or be a stockbroker or something like that in that area. And life took me to supply chain management, and I got my PhD from Texas A&M University. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, so supply chain has always been near and dear to my heart. My dad is a businessman. He's retired, but he has been in the manufacturing operations management area. So I think he has had a lot of influence on me. Even if I didn't know it early on in my career, and I ended up here in supply chain management. And after getting my PhD, I worked at the University of Tennessee in the Department of Marketing and Logistics, which turned into a supply chain management department right now. And then I came to University of Houston to help with the supply chain management program and enjoying my time at Bauer.
So it's been about 9.5 years since you've come to Bauer, yes. Right? Yes. Now, for our listeners, can you explain what is supply chain?
Okay. Supply chain, it's a very broad area, but supply chain management, the way I have defined it in my research early on and sticking to the definition, is basically integrated management of the flows of information, products, services, starting from the suppliers, going all the way out to the customers. And we have also reverse flows coming from the customers back to the suppliers. And our objective is trying to minimize cost, bring value to the customer at the end of the channel. But a lot of times people associate supply chain management with manufacturing. So there's this huge perception that, it's all about operations management and manufacturing, but it is much broader, where it applies to pretty much every industry. And as we have seen with the pandemic, all of a sudden, everybody became very familiar with supply chain management and seeing how it impacts our lives, how it is in every aspect of it.
That's exactly right. I mean, when I teach marketing, I very often say without supply chain, we probably wouldn't get products on the shelf, because of, the manufacturer makes something and then the customer gets it on the shelf. How it moves from manufacturer to the customer is all supply chain. Is that correct?
Exactly. In addition to all those flows of products and services, we also have the flows of cash. We also have the flows of information, which support the products going from the suppliers all the way to the customers. Exactly. Again, with COVID, we have seen all of a sudden, we all ran out of toilet paper. We all ran out of milk on the shelves, and we were worried about meat supply. And now we're worried about vaccine and how once the vaccine is developed, how it's going to go to the right people at the right time in the right quantities. So all those things are related to supply chain management. So supply chain management is in every aspect of our lives. And so we're seeing it more and more now.
So that's fascinating. So what is the impact of kind of new technologies like artificial intelligence on kind of supply chain as it is? Has the field changed a lot?
The field is evolving, and in fact, it's interesting. I did my dissertation in the area of information sharing and coordination in supply chains. My focus was very much on the value of information sharing. But back in the day, it was a long time ago, but what I found in my dissertation at the time is we can have all these technologies and we can have the information, and the value we get from the information in the supply chain, we improve our costs by about 2%. But what we do with that information, if we take that information and use it to coordinate our supply chains, then we're talking about cost improvements are in the range of 47-48%, which is huge, dramatic. And the field hasn't changed much in terms of looking at the information. We have more technology, we have more tools, and we can capture better data. But the thing is, what we do with that data is very important. And what I tell my students all the time is that it's great that everybody talks about data analytics. Yes, let's use the data, let's analyze the data, let's get the big data. But how do we make decisions with that data requires a significant amount of discipline understanding. We need to know our territory. We need to know how that data is relevant. So from that perspective, I think the technology is an enabler, not necessarily replacing or making the decisions for us. So I think making that distinction is very, very important. So I think the discipline knowledge is as critical, maybe even more critical now. So we can take the technological developments and the benefits that they give us and utilize it in a better way. And we're talking about blockchains and supply chains. We're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about making the data available. But, I'm taking up too much time. But for example, one of my most recent studies with my colleagues is we worked with a major grocery retail chain and looking at using point of sales data in improving the forecast accuracy. What we found is that consultants always push for, you need to have point of sales data, you need to invest in technology to be able to capture that data. But what we found was, well, point of sales data is important for demand planning. But when it comes to execution, when it comes to order fulfillment, you can equally use the order data that you have in the channel without having to really go to the granular level of data. And so, that's kind of a trade-off right there. So knowing the problem characteristics and now pulling in the data that we need is very important.
Right, I completely understand. I mean, I think, with the availability of such a lot of data, people just seem to be crazy about just the fact that you've got data. And, I'm always reminded about Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee always says, in order to become stronger, you have to actually subtract, not add. you only have to do the essentials. You actually, to be efficient, rather than just saying, oh, I just want more and more data, what you really want is to kind of be able to say, what is the critical data that you need, and kind of narrow down as opposed to necessarily expand. When I think about supply chain, as you were talking, I was thinking, was taken back to my MBA days. Our introduction to supply chain at that time was the Japanese system of kind of just-in-time management. And it was kind of revolutionary to think about. And one of the things that I read about you was that you actually have a process by which you can do a supply chain audit for companies. Can you kind of give us a snapshot of what a supply chain audit would be?
Actually, it was one of the most rewarding experiences that I have had early in my career. For instance, when I was at the University of Tennessee on the faculty, we had a team, and we were approached by companies just looking at some of their supply chain problems, and that's how we came up with the supply chain audits. So it would be 2 faculty members and 2 PhD students, which was the nice thing about it. We were able to pull in our junior future colleagues with us. And we would go in and start talking to people at the company from top level, engaging with the top management, and then also going to the front lines and talking to maybe about 30, 40 people, depending upon the size of the firm. Just looking at what they are doing, getting their own perspective, and then trying to identify what we call low-hanging fruit. And prioritizing some initiatives to improve their supply chains. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences that I have had, because it gave me a very good understanding of different firms in different industries having very, very similar problems with their supply chains, such as offering wide variety of products, stock keeping units, just to please the customer, and seeing its dramatic negative impact on their supply chains. Problems like inventory management, problems in the logistics area, or looking at offshore outsourcing some of the functions overseas, just to find out that your transportation costs are going up so much that it's offsetting all the benefits. So my research has always been initiated by an industry problem. So that also gave me an opportunity to see what's on executives' minds, dealing with high-level people from top management and seeing what keeps them up at night was really eye-opening. And it's also, just more of a learning process for us to identify more research areas.
That's actually really a nice approach. I mean, I think that's one of the very big values that the business school can provide to industry partners, which is to be able to use the knowledge that we create at the business school and apply it to the problems that they have in industry. And you're probably aware that next week we are having a internal seminar about translational research, which is really, the whole idea of what we call engaged scholarship is the idea that you go to a company, you find out the problems that they have, you come back and you work those problems out, and then they can share those solutions back. And that makes work so much more meaningful, because then that not only are you advancing the field on a theoretical level and you're getting all the wonderful publications, but you're also contributing to industry in a very meaningful way.
Exactly. For example, a paper that I'm working on right now with one of my colleagues, a similar story. We were invited to help the company conduct a supply chain audit. Right in the middle of it, and merger acquisition opportunity came up. And so all of a sudden, this firm, it's a building products industry, has many manufacturing facilities within the US as well as distribution centers. The only area they didn't have existence in was the eastern part of the US. And so this acquisition gave them an opportunity to expand into a new marketplace. So what was interesting was that as we were working with the management team, you can see the different objectives, the silo mentality within the firm, marketing being very worried about, customer service levels. And on the other hand, operations production being very worried about cost and trying to find the balance between the two. So we were all of a sudden our supply chain audit shifted to supply chain design, restructuring, facility locations. And as we got into it more, so it turned into a very big strategic project. And then we started going into the details to the execution level, which was more of a series of planning. And then another aspect of it was seeing how the managers are making these decisions. So we started learning more about the risk management and how it played a role in decision making. So all of a sudden, our mathematical modeling, responsibility turned into a big strategic plan and bringing it down to execution while addressing the managers' decision making and also risk concerns. So it was a very nice interface. And the company successfully went through the merger and acquisition based on the recommendations that we made, which makes you feel very good about yourself. And for us, we also got to see the research side of it. So those are the types of projects that I really like, and the supply chain area is very, very rich for those types of research topics.
So Funda, you're clearly a top researcher, but it turns out that you also have taken like an amazing leadership position within your field. I think you must be the absolute youngest person to ever be president of the Decision Science Institute or won a service award. How does that happen? That's completely incredible.
Well, I'm amazed at that myself, because I was so surprised when I was approached to run for the president of the institute. In fact, I was hesitant, but I said, well, I'll give it a try. I grew up in this society. I know the ins and outs, and let's see if I can make a difference. And actually, I think I was, the thing that I'm proud of related to that is I think I'm one of the I might be the fourth or the fifth woman president in the history of the Institute. So that was very special for me. And at the time, the Decision Sciences Institute had just moved to University of Houston, and unfortunately, we had lost the executive director unexpectedly. So it was a very hard time for the Institute, and we had some structural issues that needed to be handled. So I was hesitant about dealing with the challenges, but I said, well, this is the time to do it. Let's give it a try and see how it will work. I've learned tremendously from the experience, especially sitting in a boardroom where on heated issues, seeing how divided the group is, but being able to help the group come together, come to an agreement through compromise. It helped me to learn about my leadership skills, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And just basically realized the path that I want to pursue in the future.
Absolutely, and I think you bring up a really important point, which is so many women hold themselves back for fear of failure and worry that they may not be qualified, may not be ready, and I think your experience shows us that if sometimes you just have to lean in and take on a responsibility, and you emerge so much stronger. When I was doing research for this podcast on you, it turns out that you and I have something that very much in common, which is our interest and passion for women in leadership. And I, of course, that I'm the faculty director for the Women in Leadership program at Bauer, and you've actually been a student in one of our classes.
Yeah.
But I
And
did not know.
yes, and I have learned a lot from you, and I appreciate every minute of it.
Thank you, Funda. But what I realized, and it struck me when I was doing my research, that supply chain is probably, I might be wrong, somewhat male dominated field. And one of the things that you have been doing in the recent past has actually been taking leadership in mentoring and creating a community of women in supply chain. I'm thrilled about that, and I'm really interested to know more about it.
Thank you. Yes, actually, our field, unfortunately, is very male dominated. Since I started my career, even at the previous institution that I worked at, there was a strong effort to inspire our female students to pursue supply chain management. And it really makes me feel very good when I have a student approaching me and saying that, well, I see you as a role model in a field that I never thought I would personally pursue myself. And so those are probably the highlights of my career whenever I get students like that. Again, we're trying to create awareness. In fact, I'm part of a group called Awesome, which is trying to raise awareness of women's role in supply chain management area. And it was set up by very successful women from industry who are leaders in multinational companies, and they are basically getting faculty members in supply chain and management area involved as well. And moving from there, at our conferences, I've been invited to put together these workshops related to women in supply chain management. In fact, after this session, I have a meeting with my co-chair on that, and we're basically trying to address the issues. We're inviting our male colleagues, trying to hear their side of the story, not always telling our side of the story, but hearing their side of the story and see what can be done to improve the role of women in the workplace in supply chain management area, which is very male dominated, I would say.
And you raised an extremely important point, because it's not only about the women necessarily kind of become. You need everyone to see the value of diverse teams, the value that everyone brings to the table, men and women, but the perspectives and the differing perspectives are so healthy, and it is so important to see that. So I'm really excited about the initiative, and of course that we do a lot at Bauer for women in leadership, and we continue to grow that area. So it's definitely a priority for us as well. So let's move a little bit to your teaching. I know that you're an excellent teacher, and
I hope so.
no, I'm sure. I've heard there's a rumor going around that you are. So Funda, what is your kind of teaching philosophy? How do you approach teaching?
First day of class, my thing is you need to, by the end of this semester, I want my students to say, I got value out of this course. And getting value out of the course means, they may have to really put in some time into the course. It's not going to be, let's coast and go through. So my teaching philosophy is I really try to bring what I have learned in my research, in my career, or in my previous teaching experiences, in my dealings with industry. I try to bring it to the classroom, not only give them the material that any textbook will have that they can read, but also enhance it with the real life discussion. And also, I teach graduate classes, MBA classes, so I feel like there is as much I can learn from people already practicing in the field, they may not realize necessarily some of the fine points that we're trying to deliver. So I try to create an atmosphere where, as much as I'm sharing what I know, I want to hear from them and use their examples as material in the course. So I think that communication, really, getting them engaged adds a lot to the course. And usually I get students saying that I wish I had taken this course earlier. I would have switched to supply chain, or I didn't know what supply chain was. So that really is a very valuable moment for me in my career as it relates to my teaching.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think, my mom was a teacher, and, I never thought that I'd actually follow in her footsteps and teach. But she taught kindergarten and up to fifth grade. But I think that's much harder than teaching college
Yeah,
students.
definitely.
But the philosophy is the same. I mean, you want the best for the students, and you want to make them to share your knowledge. And I think, what you described in terms of the atmosphere of your classroom, and kind of bringing all the aspects of yourself, the industry experience, the research experience, your personal experiences
Yeah.
to the table, makes such a big difference in inspiring people, and kind of really make the class memorable. So if you have to kind of give um, advice to our listeners in terms of, what do you think has been uh, some of the factors that have made you the successful person that you are today? What do they need to do?
Okay. Again, I think I've learned this in the family where, my family values education very much. Just growing up, for me and my sister, for example, just getting an MBA was never a question. It was more of a, when are you going to do it, type of a thing. So, realizing education is very valuable, trying to get the best out of it as much as possible. This applies more to our students. Discipline, just being disciplined, making sure we stay focused, and trying to work on things that you like, or at least, just build a career path towards that area where, going to work or working on something is not torture, but it's something you're looking forward to as much as possible. Being disciplined, avoiding distractions as much as possible, making sure we invest in ourselves. That's another important thing. For example, I started taking, I tell my students, well, you're taking classes, but I started taking classes too, because I want to improve myself. I'm taking some of the Data Science Institute courses. I don't know how good of a student I am, but I try to stick with it as much as my schedule permits. But those types of things, always try to invest in yourself, try to see what's out there. And for example, in the morning, the highlight of my morning is watching the news on the economy and the stock market, because I learned so much about my field, about supply chain management, just hearing about what is this company doing, what are people talking about in terms of the strategies. So whatever your area is, try to find as much information as you can. Those things help me in the classroom. Those things help me with my research. Those things help me with when I'm speaking to a practitioner. So again, investing in yourself, learning as much as you can within that area you're in, being disciplined, and trying to get a holistic view of what you're doing, especially as a business person, trying to stay away from the silo approach, realizing that what you do has an impact on the overall performance of the firm, of the unit, of your group. If your group does well, you do well, type of an attitude.
Well, that's actually really great advice, because I think that, learning is not about getting a degree. successful people are lifelong learners, and there is an opportunity to learn from everything and everyone. And I think that open-mindedness and willingness to kind of absorb what people can teach you is an amazing value that you can create. So now you've already had a really successful career from a research, teaching, as well as service standpoint. What would you like to achieve in the future? Like what is some of your big dreams and goals for yourself?
My big dreams, again, just keep investing in myself. Keep investing in myself, taking on more leadership roles so I can have influence, not influence, but I can help people. It might be students, it might be colleagues. I don't know the context necessarily, depending upon what the opportunity is. But as I invest in myself, give back to the people around me and making a positive impact. Those are the things that I always aim for. So, I feel like, for example, going back to my decision sciences presidency, I feel very good about that. And I think, with the service award that my colleagues gave me, I feel like that was an assurance. And that experience, I was able to help the Institute move forward and get over some of the obstacles that was holding the Institute back. So have something similar, just making a positive impact in whatever leadership role it might be is probably the future. Again, I don't want to put any titles or any boxes around it, because you never know what is a good opportunity or not. But I would say those types of things would be what I would look for in the future.
That sounds fantastic. And, we all look forward to seeing you soar and do really well. With that, I want to kind of thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us at the Working Wisdom podcast. It's always so inspiring to talk to people who love what they do and are good at it. So thank you so much, Funda. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, and I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Working Wisdom podcast series from the CT Bauer College of Business, brought to you by the Inclusive Leadership Initiative. The initiative aims to develop inclusive leaders and family-friendly cultures that support business strategy and superior business performance. For more information about Bauer and this podcast series, visit www.bauer.uh.edu/podcast.